Hello and welcome everyone to another Sales Hacker webinar. Appreciate you hanging out with us for the next 45 minutes to an hour or so. It's going to be a really great discussion. Always fun when I get to hang out and talk with some friends about things that I genuinely enjoy speaking about. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And so what we're going to be talking about today is this kind of idea of we need to quit guessing and start knowing in our sales process. And one of the ways of doing that is selling with intent. So we're going to kind of wrestle with that topic. It's fairly broad. We're going to look at it through a couple different lenses. But before we get to it, and before I introduce my awesome guests, super quick housekeeping. So number one, I can see you all trickling in now. We had upwards of 500 folks register for this. So it's super, super exciting. And we want this to be not just us three talking to each other. We want to make this as engaging as possible. And that requires audience participation. It's way more fun for us to be up here doing what we do and talking about some of the learnings we've had when we know who we're hanging out with, who we're rocking with. So there is a chat feature at the bottom. Go ahead, introduce yourself, your name, your title, what company you're from, say hello. We'll do a couple shout outs here. And then as you have questions, as they come out, as they pop in your head, throw them in the Q&A. So separate from the chat, I'll be manning that Q&A. And if there's relevant questions to what we're talking about, I'll kind of weave them in throughout. And then we'll make sure that we leave a little bit of time at the end to go through all the questions that we missed. So that's the first order. Second, these are all recorded. So if you have to jump off for whatever reason, your dog's biting your leg, you got to go to one-on-one with your manager, who knows? There's so many crazy things that could happen now in the new work from home environment. Go deal with it. This will be in your inbox within about 24 hours. But that's the boring stuff out of the way. Now I get to introduce my guests. I am joined by Brooke Bachesta and Ernest Awasu. Brooke, Ernest, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, excited to be here.
It's gonna be a fun one. And so I know a little bit about both of your backgrounds, but for our audience, for those who registered, for those who are joining us, Brooke, let's start with you. I usually call it your superhero origin story. How did Brooke get to be Brooke Bachesta at Outreach? It's such a cool company.
Yeah. Well, hello, everybody. Nice to meet everyone over Zoom. My name's Brooke. I'm Senior Manager of Sales Development at Outreach. I've been here for about 2.5 years. I feel super lucky, learning a ton. So fun to be at a company that sells sales software to salespeople. But before Outreach, I got into SDR land straight out of school, kind of on accident, actually, which I feel like is how most people get into sales of like, oh, like somebody tells you you might be good at it. You're like, I'll try it out for a little bit before you know it. This is your whole career. But did the SDR gig. I've been an AE, was an SDR manager at another company before joining Outreach. And I love SDR land. So feeling super fortunate to be here and chatting with Ernest and Scott today about, more SDR stuff.
I love it. And I'm gonna put you on the spot here and ask a follow-up question. What are you doing right now in this work from home environment to keep you personally, I call it your cup full, or feeling energized, motivated? Because it's tough out there, especially as we get into winter, and that's like, maybe more gray depending where you are in the world. How are you keeping yourself motivated, energetic, like you always are?
Oh, thanks. I'd say trying to stay active. I've totally continued on with my fake morning commute in the morning. So I'll make coffee, go walk the dog for the same amount of time that I used to be on the bus, like 20, 30 minutes, which is cool.
Nice.
And then I've continued to do the sourdough train. I just can't let it go. Everybody got me into it. So that's been really fun too.
I love it. I like that.
Oh, you're on mute, Scott.
Oh, there we go. I like that. Fake commute, keep it going, find something to fill that time. That's awesome.
Tried to stop roll out of bed and then straight to my computer, because it turns out that's not awesome for mental health.
Yeah, no, not good for mental health, definitely. It's so crazy. You can literally, like, I personally can track the days when I like do my morning routine, all the things, infinitely more productive when I'm like, ooh, I just want like half an hour more sleep. Like I'm just in bed. So yeah, definitely huge. And Ernest, your superhero origin story, which very much truly is a superhero origin story, man. You had such a incredible journey that I got to learn more about on the Sales Engagement podcast. But if you can give the kind of 3 to 5 minute version, would be awesome, man.
Yeah, sure thing. And great to see everyone on this. My name is Ernest Owusu. I lead our sales development efforts at 6th Sense. And to Scott's point, had no idea, and also to Brooke as well, had no idea I was going to get into sales development, this whole sales development gig. But before I even got into this, I went to Cal, UC Berkeley, go Bears to anyone listening on that, and had the opportunity to play in the NFL for the Minnesota Vikings and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which was awesome. Lifelong dream, something that I always wanted to hit and get there. And obviously, with a lot of players, my career ended, and I was kind of at a crossroads trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I started asking people like kind of what I could do and kind of what path would be best for a former athlete. And like before I knew it, all roads were leading to sales, and I kind of just jumped into it. So I started as an SDR, and similar to Brooke, I became an AE, and I loved that. But one huge thing for me is I wanted that coaching aspect that I got as an athlete, and I also got as an SDR. So I jumped into sales development management, and I've been there since. I've been at 6th Sense for about 18 months or so now, so about a year and a half, and I've been loving it since.
That's awesome, man. We got some football fans here saying "Go Bears, go Vikings." We got some supporters.
Love it.
And Ernest, I'll flip the same question on to you. What have you been doing during this, everyone's the unprecedented times or the new normal or whatever buzzword you want to say? How are you keeping yourself motivated? You're always smiling when I talk to you. How are you doing that?
Yeah, so I guess mine's it's an interesting one. So we were talking about this earlier, but I just became a new dad to triplets, which has been a crazy thing in and of itself. But the positive thing of that is I get to just literally after this talk, I can go out there and just hug them and hold them and like spend time with them. So I look for the opportunities throughout the day where I can just spend time with them and be in that family environment. And that's kind of helped me in a weird way. I've never had that in a work environment. Just really enjoy being home with my family and make myself sane. That's
awesome, man. Triplets. Wow. What do you know the statistics of like what the chances are of having triplets?
I have no idea. But I will tell you, when I saw the ultrasound, my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. That's wow. And then add triplets during a pandemic. That's
pretty wild.
You deserve like 18 gold medals, man. Yeah. I hope you get to nap after this. Should we all just pause this and have a nap for Ernest's sake for a little while? All right, cool. So I want to kick this off. Let's dive right into it. And I want to get a kind of a pulse on the audience really quick. So we're going to do a couple polls. And the first one I want to do is this idea of is sales an art or a science? I would love to hear what people's opinions are. And without skewing the results too much, because it's funny, you can watch the responses kind of change as our conversation evolves. But Ernest, what do you think? Do you think people are going to skew towards science? Are they going to skew towards art? What's your personal opinion?
Yeah, definitely. So I would like to say that people will skew towards kind of a split because in my eyes, it is very much of both. Like if you look at some of the salespeople in the past, or even kind of how I developed my career, like there's some things that like I just did because it matched my personality and it was my particular way of selling. So that kind of falls into that artistic or creative motion. But the reality is there are a lot of awesome, amazing ways to be objective and data-driven in sales and to win with that. But I feel as if you can't really hang your hat on one or the other. You have to have very much a mix of both. And the best salespeople can kind of walk that line and do it pretty consistently.
Totally. And I also have to ask, is football an art or a science? You can apply this question to a lot of different things.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would definitely say it's both similarly. In a weird way to kind of think about that is sometimes you'll have this is the exact same thing with sales. Like sometimes you'll have certain athletes who like just do it really well. They don't even know how to teach people how to do it because it's just kind of who they are. And sometimes salespeople are in the same way. But the reality is, like, if you're data driven with your current abilities or talents, that you can find ways to win even more. So I would say football is probably a mixture of both. People wouldn't think so, but one of the cool things about having the opportunity to go in the NFL was knowing that, like, a lot of these players that we thought were like basically gods, like the best of the best, they had some really strong weaknesses, and the only way you'd be able to pull it out is through data. And if you have the ability to kind of watch that and make into your game plan, then you can win that way.
Yeah, Brooke, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think it is like so mixed now because like we just have a lot more information than we used to. Like even like the last 5 years, it's kind of nuts what you can do with your own process, and knowing that like the moving target of communication, like it seems like it's moving faster now. Maybe that's just me. But yeah, we totally have to keep up to date to it. So to Ernest's point, like using data to decide, okay, what worked last week might not work this week, and I can continue to be hungry crafts person and hone all those skills. And then complement my own style. Because you're right, it is like there's so much you-ness that comes through in your own sales process, and it's important to be genuine.
Totally. All right, let's see what the folks. Yeah, so kind of in line with what we're all saying here. 59% say it's 50% art, 50% science. 23% skewing 75% science, 25% art. And then we have 17% saying 25%, 75% art. Personally, I'm going to go with the 23% actually, 75% science, 25% art. I think that's the one we're going. And I think what seems to be happening, this is just my opinion, but I think it used to be much more like artists. Salespeople were salespeople. No one knew what they did. It was like a black box, and some were awesome and some weren't as good. And over time, we're kind of shifting towards a more scientific and data-driven approach. And I think the ones that embrace that will ultimately outperform the artists who maybe had some more natural given ability, which is probably what you see on the football field too, which is interesting. All right, another question. I want to talk about how is your team currently determining whether an account is in market? So this is going to go kind of through the science realm. We're not just being artists and be like, hey, I think this is a market we should go into. We got to look at the data. Curious to see what folks are saying here. Brooke, what do you think is going to be number one here?
I gotta say, I hope that we have more insight outside of just like scoring of leads and like hunting on clues. I feel like today, like from the last question, we're constantly piecing together like Nancy Drewing our way into like, hey, where should we spend our time and how do I prioritize? So I think it's going to be probably just a combo of like, yeah, your intent, engagement, stuff all kind of meshed together. But we'll see if I'm right.
Yeah. Ernest, what do you see in the market? That's very much your world. When you're talking to maybe people that aren't harnessing it yet, like where you see in the market embrace these days?
Yeah, there's definitely a shift. I think traditional approaches of looking at the MQLs and taking a lead-based approach. I can also even say for myself as a BDR, that's what I personally did. So, but the reality is like a true MQL isn't necessarily strong enough. Like if someone's downloading a white paper or if they're attending a webinar, that doesn't necessarily mean the entire company wants to buy.
Sure.
So I'd imagine that you'll probably see a lot more focus on that because that's traditionally how things have been. But for me, especially from what we're doing at 6 Cents, we take very much an account-based approach, and there are a lot of different signals as to why someone actually wants to buy from you. We actually call it a 6QA process. There's like a marketing qualified account if you want to look at it that way. And taking all those things in consideration, that's more or less of a data-driven approach that you can follow to determine whether or not someone actually wants to buy from you, as opposed to some, I guess, more sporadic signals that can come through from intent or from lead scoring or things like that.
Yeah. All right, let's see we'll close the poll, see what everyone came back with. So interesting. So the overwhelming majority, 47%, are looking at what accounts are currently in marketing by just the actions they're doing. So engagement through their sales outreach, which is, I think what we were doing when I started sales, like a long time ago, about, 6-7 years ago, doing a campaign and being like, oh, cool, finance does like us. Awesome. And so it's interesting that that's still the predominant way when we have all of these other avenues now that we can explore. Ernest, surprising these results, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely surprising, but also same thing for you. Like that's how I did it when I was an SDR BDR. But the reality is, just because you have certain accounts or even leads that are clicking your emails or opening them, like there's a reason why they're doing that. And the better way you can get a sense of whether or not a company is actually in market is if you can pick up on signals that would even essentially determine if they want to open or click your emails. So a lot of it, as I mentioned, what we do at Sixth Sense is we have a very strong ability to know like where companies are at in different buying journeys. So like there are certain companies that are like more or less like under a rock, like they actually are not interested in your product versus the ones that are, we call it the 6QA, ones that really do want to talk to you. And we've noticed that the ones that are in those higher buying stages that are like, all of your website, search for keywords around your brand, their strong profile fit, the timing is right. If you call into those accounts and you email them at the appropriate time, you're more likely to have those opens and clicks and have a lot more engagement. So again, not surprised to see that it's a lot more focused on the engagement within the emails, but the reality is we can be a lot more data driven, and it's working really well for a lot of people that are.
Yeah,
totally. Such a good point, Ernest, because I feel like when you're SDRing, it's like you have to be persistent, of course. Your pitch has to be on point, and then it's like that mystery third piece of timing of like, did that person I called just come out of a meeting where they got roasted for not having a plan for what I can help them with, or is it like, yeah, I'll get to that in 2 quarters,
Yeah, exactly. And even think about it too. I'm sure the both of you have seen this before, but like, say your company has an issue, whatever it may be. Like, I know for us, like one thing that we're always trying to figure out is like contact acquisition, because sometimes you have good phone numbers, bad emails, whatever it may be. But if I have that problem and I'm researching the web, I'm talking to people in my network, I'm showing all these digital buying behavior that I want to buy a product. If someone was to reach out to me then, as opposed to 2 or 3 weeks later, much more likely to have a conversation with me. And the reality is, if a BDR SDR is going after someone who doesn't necessarily have the ability to know that, it's a lot more difficult to get a meeting. You're kind of just guessing to see whether or not they want to talk to you.
Not really. Yeah. And Ernest, I want to quickly double click on something you said there. So you mentioned this 6QA kind of framework. Can you do a quick breakdown? What does that mean? I'm not familiar with the term.
Yeah, sure. So that's a term that we've kind of coined here at Sixth Sense. It's more of a Sixth Sense qualified account. And the whole premise behind it is we know that companies, whether you have the ability to see this or not, they kind of sit in 5 different buying stages, going in decreasing order, I'd say, of purchase and decision, consideration, awareness, and target. We know that when accounts are in purchase and decision, that means that they're researching your brand name, they're interacting with you from a first-party standpoint, third-party standpoint. These are companies that are demonstrating behavior similar to a lot of your previous customers that they actually want to have a conversation with you. So if you could attack those accounts first, and in a timely fashion, you're much more likely to open a conversation with them because they're in market for your solution, as opposed to another company who, like, yeah, it might be an ICP account, it might be that brand name you want to have a conversation with, but they actually don't want to buy your product right now. As much as you want to sell to them and you think there's a need for them, there's just not something going on. There's not an active project. So we've noticed that going after those accounts that are in market from a true data-driven perspective, we have a much higher likelihood of not only opening opportunities to them, but also converting into closed business. And the reality is, if you take a look at like this balance between art and science, like you're always going to have people that just want to get a meeting with that like big brand name because it's like the logo, the shiny logo that everyone wants, but you have a much better chance of hitting your number by going after the people that actually want to talk to you as opposed to what you want.
Totally. On actions that they've taken, not just the ones that you want. So many of us do that exercise backwards, where it's just like, oh, I would really love to get these 20 to 50 logos because they would be awesome. They'd open up these new markets, but if they're not actively doing it, you're gonna waste a lot of cycles. All right. So another big part of this, of understanding where to spend your time, which is arguably one of the most important things we do in sales and marketing. Where are we going to spend our time? Where are we going to spend our resources? Is making sure you have strong alignment. So I want to do another poll where we just talk through that a little bit. Would love to get a pulse on how people are feeling about their sales and marketing alignment on qualified accounts that you're targeting. I imagine there's a few more problems because of the whole work from home. You can't get everyone in the same room. But curious, what are you seeing at Sixth Sense, Ernest? Are you guys internally feeling feeling aligned, and what are you seeing in the market?
Yeah, so I mean, we use our own products, so we're definitely 100% aligned. And I also will say, as a BDR leader, we're kind of the ones that are tasked with making sure that alignment exists. So it is definitely really reassuring to have that data-driven approach. And honestly, I've seen it before. Like, even before I started working at 6sense, I've been in this scenario where we went to an event and we had 3,000 leads, and we had to follow up with every single one of them. But the reality is, like, the BDRs didn't want to because they didn't think that some were good accounts or whatever it may be. And whenever you take a subjective approach in terms of aligning which accounts people should go after, which context they should go after, it makes things really challenging because not everyone's bought in. But the important thing is, because we have this data-driven approach using your own product, it makes it a lot easier for not just the BDRs, marketing, but also sales to kind of put our heads together and say that this is an account that we should actually talk to because they're showing all of these digital footprints that a lot of our similar customers did beforehand. So we should all go after them.
Totally. And at the end of the day, right, like, we're all, both sales and marketing, both trying to drive revenue. So as long as we can be like, all right, are all of our actions going towards that goal, and should be pretty simple. But yeah, it is kind of funny, Ernest, because sales development is like that go-between between sales and marketing. We're usually the ones executing on those ABM plays and like helping to drive engagement on those accounts. So it's a cool spot to be in.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally.
We definitely own a lot of that. But it's more so important to have like a data-driven approach, because it can be a little bit tricky if like your market team is thinking one thing, and your sales team is thinking another. It's tough to people on both roads.
There's a question. Who should own, in both your opinions, who should own the who's making the targets? Is marketing making the targets, and then it's all coordinated approach from there? Is it sales development making the targets because they're on the front lines? Is it sales because they know what's closing? Or is it getting everyone in the room and you need all the leaders to make this decision?
I would say I've reported into both sales and marketing, and I've been in scenarios where it was sales I was only owning it, and I've seen situations where only marketing owning it. I've seen BDRs only owning it. Regardless of whether or not you have like a platform that allows you to take a data-driven approach, everyone needs to sit down together and figure it out and be on the same page, no matter what. And actually get buy and agree on it, because if you don't have that, then it's not going to work. But the fortunate thing, as I mentioned, is like using a platform, it's like black and white, so you don't really have to have those conversations too frequently.
Yeah, or even like, taking the thousands of accounts that probably exist in everybody's CRMs and saying like, here's the subset of like allowable accounts to choose your targets from, because we know that they fulfill these indicators. And then people, like to your point, Ernest, can like have that buy-in of, oh, I picked this one, like I feel really confident about it. And then from there, I see it as like, you can just turn on the faucet of SDR meetings books onto like whatever area you're trying to focus on, and then let it ride.
Yeah, I like that approach. And I feel like everyone needs to be in the same room. I feel like each department should feel like they made the decision. That's the ideal world. That's the ideal scenario. All right, we'll end that poll. So we have about, what is that? 61% are feeling somewhat aligned or not aligned. So that's not awesome. Only 24% are aligned, and 5% are strongly aligned. So this has always been an issue in our industry. I don't think it's going anywhere. When you do take a data-driven approach, alignment seems to come a lot more natural because it's not based on opinions. So that's super interesting to see. We have some great questions coming in. Okay, here's an interesting one. Before we go to one more poll, and then we're going to kind of broach some solutions to this. Rob Allen has a question. How do you take a data-driven approach with little information? So maybe you don't have the tools, you don't have the 6sense, you don't have the outreach, you don't have all those, data points. Maybe you're living in a world where, hopefully you have a CRM, but you're playing with limited information. What data do you look at? Can you take a data-driven approach? Brooke, let's start with you on this one. It's a tough question, but I know you've been in this industry for a while. What were you doing before you had all these cool analytics at your
Yeah,
fingertips.
before I was like totally spoiled with the outreach tech stack. I mean, I think like in past roles, some of it, you're making your best guess, right? Of like, what's the workflow or like, what's the problem that I solve? And like, even if I don't have the industry specific or even, in some cases, the billing address of like where these companies are, I can make some reasonable assumptions around like titles that you might be able to pull from LinkedIn or just, giving your reps basically a more fleshed out version of a BANT or like an accepted opportunity card. Like, here's what you're looking for. And then like start to compile that as you go. So cleaning as you go. But like early days, it's usually just general title of someone on LinkedIn and then trying to create many indicators of like, well, they typically run into these issues and we'll go after those folks. That was a really squishy answer, but I hope that was helpful, Rob.
It's helpful. It's a tough one, right? Like data driven without data is difficult. Ernest, anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, I definitely say scrape whatever kind of data you can find. Yeah. But if you don't have a tool like a Sixth Sense, then I can honestly speak for myself as a BDR before I started working here. And, it kind of doesn't scratch the surface in terms of what it can do. But at the very least, like getting a strong hold on like someone said ICP, it's not Insane Cloud Prophecy. I love that though. It's your ideal customer. So like the person that you want to sell to, the company that you want to sell to, and getting a strong sense of what that looks like and taking a historical look at the very least on like what kind of opportunities have progressed based upon companies and personas that fit that mold. Now, the reality is if you do have that, it's strong because it gives you a stronger sense of like what kind of companies are interested in your product. But there is that missing piece, obviously, of like not knowing when they actually want to buy from you. But if you don't have the ability to at least know when they want to buy, at least focusing in on like past opportunities, past wins, and the personas and companies and their profiles that are associated with both, and using it as your compass as to kind of how you want to talk to someone.
Yeah, good thoughts. I'll give a kind of a quick cheeky answer there. If you're at an organization that doesn't have any of this data, what I would personally do is look at what other people in your industry are doing. Who's your competitor targeting? Because they might have better data than you, and you can copy and go after that. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Keep your head up. Look at what other people are doing and make that assumption that hopefully they're being data driven, and you can test those waters. All right, last one I want to do is this. So last question, in your opinion, what is the most effective strategy to prospect into an in-market account? So we've got our accounts. Now we're going to actually act on them. Curious to see these results. Brooke, what do you think is going to come out number one?
I mean, multi-channel is pretty hot right now, so I have a feeling that one's going to be really popular. And it's so tough, right? Because we're in this constant battle of how do we have a ton of volume and like juice the pipeline more, but still be quality in our approach. So we'll see.
Ernest, what are you thinking?
Well, I would hope, and I hope that, not to shame anyone who's done this or voted for this, but hope that we don't see volume. because there are a lot of studies that came out once COVID initially happened that people were taking that approach and it wasn't necessarily working for people the way they wanted it to. But I'll definitely echo Brooke and lean more on Brooke for this as well, because I know you've kind of stapled it over there in outreach. But I would definitely say taking a multi-channel approach, like using all channels, providing value across the board is kind of what I would expect, but who knows, we'll see what everyone says.
Let's check it out. All right, we'll stop it now. Cool. All right, so we have a tie. I like this tie.
Whoa.
This is a good tie, I think, between multi-channel and personalization and relevance. Ideally, you're doing both. Sandwich those, and then you're rocking. Volume took a big hit, only 2%. Volume gets a bad rap these days, but to collect enough insights and data to power your personalization and relevance, you still need the volume up there, which has become an unpopular thing to say. But if you're only doing 8 to 12 hyper personalized things, you never have the feedback loop that comes that's going to get you to where you want to be. So volume gets a bad rap. Something I wanted to highlight there, though, because you got to do it. I remember the days of 100, 150 touch points, and you can learn a lot. from banging that out. Of course, it's not a different world now, and there's a lot of noise in the market, but that's super interesting. Brooke, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I agree. Volume does get a bad rap, although I don't miss the days when I was an SDR, and I am ashamed to admit that I would do a mail merge of like 3,000 people at a time and just fling it into the internet and then wait for somebody to come back. Not very effective.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's true. You do have to have the volume to feed your pipeline. Because, you have all this data around when people want to buy, but you can't know everything. And sometimes you just got to go have conversations with people and build that pipeline of like, you know what? I didn't know Scott is not ready to buy now, but he gave me a good opportunity to follow up next year. And now I'm piling these people for later. And that's where I think that art and science comes in of like, you just got to talk to people. And so you constantly have to be filling your pipe with, adding folks to sequence, running a bunch of campaigns and getting your feelers out there.
Mm-hmm. Ernest, anything to add on top of that?
Yeah, and I'll also say, Brooke, I definitely did that as an SDR before.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, but
funny story before I get into that. There was one time where I did that, trying to schedule a ton of meetings for the following week, sent like almost 1,000 emails at like 7:00 on a Friday night. That was horrible. But to your point, you do still need the volume. There's no question that you can't just push out like 10 or 15 emails or 10 or 15 calls, expect to get to where you want to go. But I am happy to see that mix between multi-channel and personalization. I think that's more or less of what you should be focused on. But that balance between volume and personalization, I think people really struggle with how they should do that. But I'm happy to see that at least those two are on the top of the list because I think they're really important.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to like prioritize your day so that you're not trying to clone like, hey, I'm making 10 really killer, super personalized emails and now I have to do 50. Like that's totally unmanageable. And I agree, it is, but there's ways to kind of loop that in and like mix it into what you're already doing to just kind of spread your goodness around without killing yourself over an unattainable level of work.
Mm-hmm. Totally. All right, and now I want to kind of go into a little bit of like an Intent Data 101 overview and how you're both using it at your orgs to book meetings, to fuel your organization. But before we get to that, we do have a question. It's not overly relevant, but I feel this question. You're both SDR managers at incredible organizations. So this is clearly an IC who wants some help, and I think you two can help. So I'm gonna ask it. So Ethan Renteria says, I would love to hear tips around cold call intros. How are you starting a cold call, as well as cold email subject lines and intros. So hyper tactical. We're gonna try and help Ethan. Ernest, how is your team opening cold calls today? What's like that opening line? I'm sure you're doing experiments all the time. What is it right now? What's working?
Yeah, so that's interesting. And definitely want to lean a little bit more on Brooke on this. But one thing I will say, even before we get into the intent portion, we use the keyword research we see, and that informs how we're emailing and calling people. So we see it time and time again. Because I know from being an SDR, BDR, sometimes it's kind of nerve-wracking and a little scary at times to call people. But because we're calling accounts that actually want to have a conversation with us and we're using language similar to what they're searching for, it makes it a lot easier for us to kind of segue into a conversation. So we tend to lead with that and not in a creepy way where we're saying, I know you're researching this, or I know you're on this portion of our website or things like that. But, for example, if someone's researching account-based marketing and we talk about, then we open our call with something around account-based, it makes it a lot easier for the person to have some kind of familiarity with your company and your brand and what's going on. So you can kind of have that transition to a conversation. But that's what we've done from an intent standpoint. And we've had a lot of success with that. But Brooke, I want to hear also kind of what you guys, I know you all are testing a ton over there.
Yeah. Really tactically, we open up all of our calls. Well, they're recorded. So you got to say, hey, this is Brooke on a recorded line calling from Outreach. So got to get that in there. And then we just say like, hey, did I catch you at a bad time? Or can I have a couple seconds? And I think the most important thing to keep in mind are like our newbie, brand new hires have a very structured script that they follow. But once you get to be into kind of the upper segments, we essentially give you a formula of, okay, you have to obviously do your intro. And your hook has to be relevant to both or to three areas: the company, the industry, and the person. And if you can't find a way to like wrap those all together, it's going to sound really canned and you're going to sound like you're like pandering to this person. If you're like, hey, Ernest, I saw you played in the NFL. So you want to talk about outreach? And you're like, how does that make any sense? So finding ways to loop those three together. And then of course the transition statement. Like I learned this from Beck Holland of like finding a way to tie your product. How does it make sense to that person? Because a lot of times as an SDR, when you're making a bunch of cold calls and you hear somebody say a keyword like, oh, I work out of spreadsheets, to you, it seems so obvious. Like, oh my God, they got to take a meeting with me now. It sounds so painful. I can help them solve this. But if you don't really clearly articulate, okay, why is that an issue and how can I help? It's going to kind of be a moot point. So in summary, have your 3 points: person, industry, company, and then your transition of like, why does any of that matter to what you can do with them? And then your subject line, you know, I wish I had a silver bullet. It's got to be personalized, not gimmicky. Please don't put everything in all caps or say like free something in there. But yeah, genuine and relevant to them.
Yeah, relevant, can't be misleading. I remember the 2 that have been great for me that I still think are the most. This is a few years ago now, but can you give me a hand was one that was really, it's just direct. It's like exactly, and was like a referral ask. And then nobody likes a cold call was another one. I know it kind of poked fun at the fact that I was cold calling them. Those are 2 subject lines, email subject lines that worked for me. Try them out. All right. So B2b intent data, this idea of being able to know who is actually, in market has been around for a while now, but many are still struggling to successfully operationalize it. For those leaders, those ICs on the call that are maybe this is kind of new to them, they're not in a very tech forward organization. Ernest, can you give us the kind of uninitiated quick intent data 101 overview?
Yeah, I think just to put it simply, intent data is some kind of data point from a company that they want to have a conversation with you. Whether that's someone who's on your website, they're searching for certain keywords, they're on G2 reviews, they're demonstrating some kind of activity that is a stronger leading indicator that you should go after them. And for us, like a lot of what we focus on is the keywords that companies are researching, whether it's our company, our competitors, keywords around kind of what our space does. We also take a look at our website. If we have some certain companies going on our website and we know exactly what's the point of that website, we use all those different portions of intent data to be a compass, because we know if I can get a sense of what that activity is and kind of why they'd be doing that. We've essentially built this thing we call value cards. So kind of like a play on words for value cards, but like, for example, say there's a company that's on our customers page. We have our main personas of who we're going after. And we've basically identified if that persona is on this customer page, why is that person doing that and what kind of business problems they're trying to solve with their company? And I'll use that as my compass as to how I'm going to talk to them on the phone, how I'm going to talk to them through email, etc. But the whole, I guess, better way of saying that is just using intent data as a compass as to what you should be talking to people based upon what kind of information they're showing you.
Yeah, that was a great overview. So it could be anything from like the traditional, let's say, ebook download or something that's showing intent, all the way to, hey, this person went on this specific web page, typed in this in the search bar. Therefore, we can draw conclusions that, hey, they could be interested in this.
100%. Exactly.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's talk about some ways of that your respective organizations are using it. And Brooke, I know we use intent data at Outreach. How do we utilize it?
Yeah, I think it's just such a helpful way to prioritize accounts, because when you're an outbound SDR and you have hundreds of accounts in your name, and even if you're on an enterprise scale and it's less than that, you still have to know, like, where am I going to spend my time today? And of course, you have your best guesses based on like, hey, who are our customers, who looks like that I can go speak the same language to. But then you also have accounts that you need to supplement that with. And a lot of times, like, we'll use Bombora to create smart views for our reps that say like, hey, I know we have all this objective grading happening in our accounts with things like their industry, the size of the company, the name of the title of the persona. But also like, hey, if they're researching our competitor, like that better ratchet this account straight up to the top of your queue so you can get them in sequence ASAP. and like, I like that term compass, Ernest, of like, it's helping you to refine what you're doing so that you're not just throwing stuff out there and like running around with your head cut off, but you can have a really tailored approach and know, hey, here's the 5 accounts that I'm going to tackle today, and just keep shoveling stuff into my pipeline.
Yeah, I remember, and I keep this webinar keeps throwing me back to the to the days of like dealing with all of this. And I remember prioritization felt like the most important thing to me as an individual contributing BDR. It really did. When I had because it allowed me to focus. And when I was hyper focused and felt like I was prioritized on the right things and I wasn't spinning my wheels, I was incredibly, like probably 10x more effective than on those weeks where I was just like, I don't know, I'll hit my dials and my emails, but I don't really know exactly what I'm doing, or I'm just kind of shooting in the dark a little bit. And this is kind of the beauty of intent data. It allows that focus with the greatest return, which is, ultimately what we're striving for. Ernest, how do you drink your own champagne with intent data at 6 Sense? Is it just about account focus, account prioritization? Is it more than that?
Yeah, so it's definitely more on the account focus, and then based upon what we're seeing with the intent, figuring out what to say based upon that. And I did see a question in there about, how you tackle this from an enterprise perspective, and I think that's a really good question, so I want to take that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Similar to what I said, and Brooke kind of caught on to that, using intent data as more of a compass. Like if you have a huge company that's like 10,000, 20,000 people, like that's really intimidating trying to figure out where it's coming from. So depending on what kind of intent solutions you have or kind of how you're picking up the intent, I would encourage people to use that information they have, whether it's like a first party or third party piece of data, and build buying teams around that. So like, if you only have the ability to see like website visits or certain keywords, like getting a sense of where that activity is coming from and knowing that if someone is searching for that keyword for that company, like take this 10,000 person company and whittle it down to that particular buying team in that one location from where the activity is coming from. And that puts you down to anywhere from between like 20, 30 people at times. We'll see kind of what the situation may be. But it can be tricky on the enterprise side if you don't have the ability to see at least the location information. But if you can see that, you can go to LinkedIn Navigator, just pop it in there and get a sense of what kind of person from the buying team would be doing that kind of research. But for us, in terms of like what we do to operationalize this, our entire structure from literally, we have a dashboard where we basically, it actually lives in our product. We also have it within Salesforce, but we have a dashboard where it's like priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, priority 4, where it shows whether or not these accounts are in market and kind of what kind of triggers have been pushing them down these buying stages based upon the intent levels they have. And once we have the ability to kind of look into our prioritization and click into the account, we can see kind of what's been happening recently. And a big thing that we focus on is the timing aspect of that. I think a lot of people, when they think about intent data, it's great because like it's obviously a great compass and shows the information that's been happening at the organization. But a really big missing piece is you have to attack when it's actually happening. It's kind of like, we all, fundamentally know if an inbound request comes through and you take like, a day to respond to them, the chances of you actually converting that significantly decrease. It's the exact same situation as a company doing research on your brand or your competitors. If you wait like a week or two to reach out to them, then your chances of converting them are significantly decreased. So in terms of how we operationalize our prioritization system, make sure our team knows like which accounts are in market, are showing intent, and how quickly can we go after them to make sure we convert them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point of how to approach the enterprise with intent. I mean, it kind of goes back to what you were saying, Brooke, of like the relevance piece. It allows you to be company, industry, and personally relevant. Because like take a huge company, hot company like Twilio or something right now. They could have an active project that your product or service solves, but there's only going to be, out of their huge, thousands and thousands of people organization, there's only, 2 or 3 people that maybe their job is on the line to go and figure this thing out. So if you can easily find those people and then tie in that relevant messaging, your win rate's going to go through the roof on that one.
Yeah, and like super tactically thinking of like how do you go find those folks? So I work in the mid-market space, so it's not quite as large as the behemoths of like the strategic companies that some folks at Outreach are going after. But let's say you have intent data and you understand there's certain keywords that somebody's searching, and maybe you don't have the location, but you know, like somebody keeps Googling things in the space. This is where like you can pair it with that volume and automation approach, which again has been totally burned in the past. But if you're using those referral plays, our team loves those. Now, keep in mind, automated sequences still only get like a 1% to 2% response rate. But if you're asking all these individual contributors and saying like, hey, can you point me towards whoever, I think it's this person in your department. Can you confirm or deny that they're the ones in charge of your tech stack or like evaluating sales engagement? If they don't reply, no harm, no foul, right? But if they do, now you've saved yourself months of like work, and you can get to those people within that really small window of time when you know it matters to them and they are evaluating. So you're kind of pairing those two together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. And then make sure also just something I want to highlight there. When you're doing that, make sure that your hypothesis with the person you're suggesting, you can back it up with like two sentences. Like here's why. Don't just like, I think it's this person, that is completely irrelevant. And usually if it is a decent educated guess, even if it's the wrong person, you know, people will appreciate the thought that went
totally
to that. Yeah. That's the great thing about creating those kind of hypotheses. Even if they're wrong, people really like to tell you they're wrong, and that's really helpful.
It is.
You know? So come with an opinion, and it can be helpful. Okay, so that kind of bleeds into my next question, which is, you know, is it possible to use intent data to create messaging that's still ultra relevant to prospects, but without being, you know, too creepy? And is it even creepy? It's not even that weird to me anymore, because now I know what's going on. I'll be like looking at, you know, real estate or something, and now I'll get like a text message, which is a whole new crazy thing.
Right?
And they're like, hey, you're looking at property, what's up? I'm like, this is so automated, it's ridiculous. But how do you make sure it's not coming across creepy, weird, invasive, security, compliance, all these things come into play when you're trying to harness this?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's kind of funny. I'm sure the two can kind of think back on this as well. But in the days where people used to send emails saying, I saw you open and click my email, so talk to me. You can't really do that kind of stuff anymore.
Oh man, did it work for 5 weeks though? Back in 2013.
There was a time where it worked.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is you can't do that anymore. It's just not, it's people, they don't expect to be treated that way. But the reality is you can provide value to someone. So like, it's not enough to explicitly say, I saw your research in this, or I saw that you're on this website, or I saw that you did X, Y, and Z. But if you have a strong understanding of what they're doing and kind of why they're doing that, like you can reach out to them in a way where it's teaching them about the issue that you think they're trying to solve, and trying to educate them as to why your product solves it for them. And that's what we found has been a really effective way for us to use different pieces of intent data to not be creepy, but to just explicitly say that, you know, I think this is something that's going to help your organization, or I think that taking an intent-based approach, or taking you know, account-based approach, whatever it may be, is a good way that your team can solve your problems.
Yeah, and that's like where the you-ness comes into prospecting, and like where I think the fun part is in prospecting. Like I don't get a lot of joy out of just like smile and dial totally automated. I think it's really fun though when you're like, hey, I have a clue here that they're researching sales tools. And I also, because there's so much information on the internet, like how hard would it be to find, like, are they hiring people? Did they open a new office? Are they launching a new product? Did they just bring on a new CMO who's doing a big events thing digitally? Like you can piece all that together and write a killer email that's like, I know what's going on in your industry. And it's not because I'm like stalking you. It's because I took the time to research. And it's not just like, hi, I see on your LinkedIn that you have a pulse and lead a sales team, and I like to sell you sales software. Just meshing them all together.
Yeah, totally. That's the art for sure. Coming through. What about this idea? So we just went and we saw this data, right? This we should have multiple channels, multi-threading, getting in front of a lot of people. Do you still recommend that? Let's say there's some people that you think are in target, but the intent data is not telling you that they are. Do you still recommend, hey, get in front of a few other folks outside of it and use it more as a North Star and not so, you know, black and white, if you will?
Yeah, and totally, because, you know, the reality is it takes entire teams to buy. Like it takes 7, 8, 9, 10 people at times to buy a piece of a product. So like there's no reason why I shouldn't try it and reach out to the people that are going to be involved in the process. So yes, you might have strong indicators that it might be this one person or this one or two people that were doing the research and all of your website, all that kind of stuff. But the reality is they're going to still need their counterparts to be a part of the process. So I need to start educating them, because part of when they do get looped in is I want them to have some kind of familiarity with what we do. So it'll make it a lot easier to push them down the funnel.
Yeah, and from an SDR side, right? Like you probably know who your person is. Like you got your C-level executive who's going to sign off, and you're like, I got to get in touch with them. So you'll shoot your shot and like send a killer email. But then you have all these other people, and we always coach our SDRs, especially up market when the deals get larger and you do have all these buyers on here. Like do your own mini discovery calls. Like get in touch with those folks, and even if it's not a meeting you would like set with your AE, like learn what you can, and then use that to better inform your next outreach to somebody.
Yeah, that's so huge. And I think what differentiates good SDRs from great SDRs is even those no's, extracting the information that's going to get you a better, batting percentage next time, is huge. Great point to bring up. All right, let's dive into it. We have some great questions. We've got about 9 minutes left. I'm just going to start firing these questions off. We'll see how many we can get through. Thank you, everyone, for the incredible engagement throughout. You guys have been super active and really great questions. All right, first question coming up from Marcel Attacks. Marcel, thank you for the questions. Does an SDR's approach differ when approaching people from different cultures and countries? To give a European example, I am based in Belgium. I find it harder to approach people from the Nordics as compared to Dutch people. Thoughts here, Brooke? I know we have our UK office at Outreach. I know we're selling into Australia now. So there's all sorts of different things going on. Do you think the approach stays the same, or is it different?
I think it totally changes kind of based on cultural norms, or even like our UK team, they have this line on the phone where they say, yep, it's a cold call and here I am, like your favorite salesperson, ha ha ha. And I don't know if that would fly in the US. We'd have to probably ask Caitlin, who leads our team out there, for all the specifics on, tactically what is different, but 100% it changes. And even like different parts of the US of like how your prospects prefer to receive information, or any of that. I think that's that human approach for sure.
Yeah, I definitely with that. I at my previous company, I led part of our EU team, and let's just say our sequences from the US didn't quite work over there. Let's just say that. So yeah, the language is different, the velocity, the aggressiveness, all of that I noticed was quite different. So it is important to be very much in tune with the cultural aspects of where you're prospecting into, because you can take, like, I feel like you can take like some of the fundamentals, like challenger approach or providing value, but the way you communicate it and like even the aggressiveness of how you do it, I've noticed is actually very different.
For sure.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And you can, a lot of places, particularly, EMEA, it kind of feels like it's maybe a little bit behind, right? They're slower to adopt technology. Some of the best practices are a little bit slower to get over there. So I think a good approach might be looking at some of the things that North American companies were doing, like maybe even like a year and a half ago, not quite as, maybe direct as they are now, a little more tongue-in-cheek. We have a little more personality in it now, because that's just, we have to stand out. That would be my 2 cents. And then obviously go interview customers from each one of those regions and just get it straight from them. That's going to be your best bet. All right, Ryan has a question here. How do you approach how do you approach a prospect who has intent but is not on your list? Okay, so reading between the lines there, I'm going to assume, and Ryan, you can let me know if I'm wrong, that maybe they have named accounts, and they have 50 named accounts, and their intent data is showing them other accounts to go after that are not on their 50 named accounts. How would you approach that? Is that a conversation you should have with your manager? Brooke, let's start with you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we have swim lanes set up like in lieu of geo territories, like everybody has their own bucket to work within. If the account is owned by your teammate, then good karma coming to you when you let them know that like they got a hot lead coming their way. And if it's not, then we encourage our reps to, we call it harvesting, where they would just submit a request to operations, be like, hey, like I have it on good data here that this account is worth my time and I would like to bring it into our CRM. And I think if you know that they are researching, but maybe you don't have a ton of information outside of that, you just straight up cold prospect of like typically who are your personas that you would go after, maybe throw a couple of referral sequences in there, or just like activity to learn about the account, schedule yourself some mini disco so that when you do find out who the person is that's evaluating your competitor software, you can have a really tight call, email, LinkedIn message, whatever, to them.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Ernest, anything to add on that?
Yeah, sure. So we actually have a pretty cool process over here at 6 Cents where all our BDRs, whether it's a named account or not, they're attached to all the accounts that live within our Salesforce. So whenever we see an account that's in market, and basically in market, it's like an account that's a strong profile fit, they're showing intent, whatever it may be, we assign that to them. So the whole purpose of me saying that is if you are seeing an account that does have some kind of intent in there in your Salesforce or whatever it may be, first and foremost, check to see whether or not they're actual fit. Because if they're not a fit, great, but obviously you can't sell to them. And then also check to see when that activity was happening, because the timing aspect of it is really important. But if all those things kind of align, then I would definitely try and go after it, because if it's a fit, they're showing intent, the timing is right, then that's definitely something you want to go after.
Totally. All right. Last question, or maybe we'll have time for two more. Second last question. This is from Matea. What types of sales analysis / reports do you use and like the most, or you consider the most relevant? Brooke, what's your favorite report that you're looking at every day?
Probably how many accepted opportunities came in, and then like meetings booked outside of that. But I think like the best leading indicators that I have that tell me like whether or not my team is focusing their time appropriately is like specific sequences that they're using, and then comparing that to like their named account. So this is within outreach thing, but I'm just looking for, are they prioritizing their time well? Because it is so easy, as we've all talked about, to be really busy as an SDR, but not actually productive when you get down a rabbit hole. And so kind of shutting off any of those side tunnels that can distract people, and just making sure that they're focused on the right things. So sequence usage, and then like accounts that they're penetrating into.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'd probably say for mine, same thing for you, Brooke, meetings.
Shocking.
Yeah, that's the ATM right there. So.
Yeah. But I guess the second one that we really care about is we want to have a strong pulse of how many accounts are in market and how much activity and when the activity happens towards those accounts, because we know that if you can hit them as soon as they come into those buying stages, there's a high chance of converting. So on the 6 Cents side, it's exclusive to us and some of our customers. We care a lot about that.
Nice. I like that. How many accounts in market, sequence usage, huge. Interesting thing that's top of mind right now that outreach will have soon, a sentiment analysis. That's going to be really interesting too. What are people responding with? Not just open replies, responses, but how are they perceiving your email? I think that's going to be super interesting down the line too. All right, last question. Let's sneak this one in. Another hyper tactical one. This is from Joel. Joel, thanks for the question. What's your strategy, or what is the strategy you teach your teams with LinkedIn messaging? How do you start the conversation, and more importantly, that transition? Because don't connect and pitch. We all know that. But when is it appropriate to make a transition from like, hey, we're homies, we've been connected for a while now. When is it appropriate to send that LinkedIn message? Yeah. Who wants to tackle that one first? Ernest, you got it.
I can take it for like 20 seconds. So the approach that we take is a personalized, no pitch connection request first, just to start, like, so you can engage with them, building rapport through profile views, likes, comments, clicks, whatever it may be. And then once you feel like they're familiar with your brand, then you can either comment on something, start asking them questions, and ask. But the biggest thing that a lot of people are missing is building the rapport. And sometimes they're looking for the quick fix on LinkedIn, but we've noticed that building some kind of rapport is really important before you ask for a meeting.
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah, and our reps use it all the time to book meetings. Yeah, whether it's like in the comments with people, following their prospects or their company, like whatever it is that they're putting out. Like small tip, but our reps try and really avoid anything that's like, don't copy paste your email into LinkedIn because it's far too long. And most of the meetings that we book are in those like really quick back and forth chats where like you've been talking to them before, and then it's like, hey, I just saw you hired sales reps. Wait for a reply. Hey, how are you onboarding them? Wait for a reply. And then you're like having an actual conversation. Very unlikely that you'll send an email style and then an agreement to get a meeting. Straight from there.
Yeah, if it's more than like 3 sentences on LinkedIn, most people's brains shut off. It's more like a text message. I think you should treat it like super casual, and don't try and put too much in that initial thing. Like Brooke, like you said, just like one question, like one, just plant that seed
and
a
like
bit.
Rapid fire. Like if you step away for 20 minutes, so did your prospect, and they'll forget. So you got to get it while it's hot.
Totally. Yeah, I love it. Well, Brooke, Ernest, thank you so much for all the insight. Thank you for everyone who joined us. Do go check out 6 Sense, doing some really cool things. Great partner of Outreach. Outreach 6 Sense together. It's like, should not even be fair. That's a whole new level. But thank you again, and we'll see everyone next time.